Welcome to Lift the Lid Leadership 423, and I'm your host, Matt Yeager. I'm so glad that you joined me again today. We're just working through each of these leadership issues as we move along here, and we're building a foundation and building upon each thing as we go along. So hope you've heard the last couple, and today, here we are in the middle of a cafeteria. You can see that in the background here. I'm not really going to eat anything in front of you here today because that would be a little bit rude, but I do want to talk about eating a little bit and the importance of nourishment as we build ourselves and grow. Because in this cafeteria, there's lots of options for food, lots of choices. So how do we make those choices? How do we move forward with things that are going to be best for us? Well, there are things that are really healthy, like the vegetables and the protein and different things that we need to put into our system to help us grow and develop. There are other things that are not so good in our systems, maybe things that we like some of the sweets and desserts, and maybe a little bit extra carb loading that may not be beneficial. I mean, if we're an athlete, maybe so. They need those extra carbs because they're burning a lot of calories. But as a general rule, most of us in the general population need to eat a pretty balanced diet to move forward and to grow in the way that we should, so that our bodies maintain maximum effectiveness and health for the long run. So just like that, in the leadership venue as well, we need to make choices about how we're going to grow and how we're going to lead. We need to continue to eat and to grow in our leadership. And the way to do that is there's lots of sources that help us to grow. I know growing up, I did not like to read. I mean, reading was like, forget it. Now, if it was doing math problems, yeah, I could do those all day long. But reading, don't even give me a book unless it's maybe a sports book about a historic athlete who was awesome, and or something like that. I could get through some of those and enjoy them, but for the most part, I did not like reading. Now, my sister Janelle, she was an avid reader. She loved to read, and she'd just read all the time. But I did not understand that. It wasn't until later, till I probably got into my 30s, that I really appreciated the value of books. And as I did, I began to read, and I developed a discipline of reading. And as a result, I gained a lot of extra knowledge and insight that I wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And since that time, too, the development of podcasts and books on audio have been helpful as well. So there's a number of books I've got through just by listening on audio. And I could double up sometimes with my workouts and with my listening to podcasts that I could get two for the price of one. But let me just share a few tips and some things. I think one of the early books that I read that I would highly suggest for everyone else is a classic, Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Effective The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. All right, getting my tongue twisted here. But the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. What was really unique about his book? It was really ground shaking, and several decades ago when he wrote that, because most of the leadership books that had been written were about technique, and this book is more about character and about really valuing people. It talks about things like listening before you talk, and the development of the internal things that are actually help with the development of the externals. Now, that doesn't mean that technique and everything else isn't a bad thing to learn. They certainly are, but those are not primary. The core issues start internal with what we're doing, and so we want to be able to start and work on our internals first, and then we can work on our externals from there. Another book that I read too was a guy by the name of Foster, and it's called Richard Foster, and it's called Celebration of Discipline. Now, this is more of a Christian-based um, book, but it is really phenomenal. Some of the disciplines that he talked about, their core values that really help someone from a faith standpoint build build their internals and their disciplines that help make them successful in the long haul. And as I began listening to podcasts, there's a number of podcasts I like to listen to a lot of different perspectives on podcasts because it gives me a broader view and kind of expands my mind a little bit. Sometimes people I don't agree with, sometimes people I do, but I'll give you a couple really good podcasts that I think are worth paying attention to. Craig Groeschel, who's pastor of the largest church in the U.S., but also has this big leadership network, and his podcasts are actually for someone who has faith and someone who doesn't have faith. Is really strictly leadership, but they're excellent. Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. Andy Stanley, another pastor who also does podcasts that are general for leadership, is very, very good. The Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast. Patrick Lencioni, who has been doing leadership training and helping businesses grow and develop their organizations for a lot of years. It's called At the Table. And Patrick Lencioni and his staff put on a really good podcast that really helps you innovate and think and improve in what you're doing. So I hope that you'll take this little encouragement. And here's the thing too: when we grow, we have to grow in a lot of different ways because we all learn a little bit differently. Some of us may learn a little bit better from auditory, some from visual, some from just doing things ourselves. But it's really important that we develop the opportunities to learn in all of those areas, even if one of those areas primarily really connects with us the best. We ought to probably have the bulk of our stuff in there, but it's still good to learn from other venues as well. And so I would just encourage you to really take upon the things that we build on from the last two podcasts of understanding truth about where our deficiencies are, where our strengths are. So how can we make those deficiencies not hinder us, and how can we build those strengths into even greater strengths? And that's where these growth mindset comes in of pursuing and looking at things that we can eat and consume, not necessarily from a food standpoint, but from a mental and emotional and a spiritual standpoint that helps develop us as people, which allows us to be more successful. So I hope you have a great week. Looking forward to talking with you again next week, and hope that you can grow a little bit more this week and lift the lid off of your leadership. See you soon. Bye-bye.